I want you to take a second and just picture your bank account.
Yeah, everybody's got that number in their head right now.
Right. You probably track your balances. You manage your debt-to-income ratio. You watch interest rates fluctuate.
And you plan your whole life around those numbers.
Exactly. We all operate within this financial architecture every single day. But today, our mission is to look at the foundational source code of that architecture.
We're going right into the plumbing.
We are going into the actual plumbing of how a dollar, a euro, or a pound comes into existence. We're going to completely dismantle the conventional wisdom about what money actually is.
And frankly, why understanding this completely changes how you view the world.
It really does. Because economics usually feels abstract.
And boring, let's be honest.
A bit boring, yeah.
Yeah.
But today's deep dive is entirely different. We are pulling from an incredibly eye-opening excerpt. It's titled Chapter 2 of 7, The Mechanics of the Pump.
Which comes from a larger source document called Geplagte text.
Right. And our goal for you today is to completely break down what this text is telling us.
That's exactly the goal, because the reality of what is happening inside the financial system isn't just some abstract theory for academics to debate. It's the fundamental operating system of our entire society. We're going to take you on a journey, starting with a simple, everyday $1,000 bank loan. And we'll follow that thread all the way up to the ultimate fate of the global economy.
All from that one loan.
Yeah. And by the end of this deep dive into the source material, we're going to look at the evidence showing that the system isn't actually broken. It's doing exactly what it was built to do.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you were to ask, most people to describe the basic business model of a commercial bank,
they'd give you the classic textbook answer.
Right, the standard middleman theory. Someone goes to work, earns a paycheck, and deposits their savings into the bank.
And the bank holds onto that liquidity in a big vault somewhere.
Exactly. Then somebody else comes along who wants to buy a house or start a business. They ask for a loan, and the bank takes those deposited savings and lends them out.
The assumption is that the bank just acts as a financial intermediary.
A safe with a lending desk attached to it.
Which is a story printed in introductory economics textbooks. It forms the foundational assumption of how we generally think credit works. But the bombshell from our source text today is that this traditional view is completely, demonstrably false.
It's totally made up.
And to be perfectly clear from the jump, this is not some fringe internet conspiracy theory. This is a documented institutional fact.
Right. And the text points to a 2014 paper published by the Bank of England to back this up.
Which is not exactly a radical organization.
No, the Bank of England is one of the most conservative, buttoned-up financial institutions on the planet. And in that paper, they stated plainly that the middleman theory is a myth.
It's just not how it works.
When a commercial bank gives you a loan, they do not look for someone else's savings. They don't draw down existing reserves.
They literally type a number into a computer next to your name.
Just keystrokes.
What's fascinating here is the sheer mechanics of it. That money, the loan you just received, did not exist a second before the loan officer executed the contract.
It wasn't moved from another account.
No. It was generated through a new ledger entry at the precise moment you signed the paperwork. The modern banking system operates on this mechanism of credit expansion.
Hold on, though. Because if we are saying banks can literally just type money into existence through ledger entries, what stops them from just typing $1 trillion into their own corporate accounts and buying up the whole planet?
Right. There has to be a catch.
There must be some accounting mechanism keeping this in check, right? They can't just create wealth without a corresponding entry.
That is the crucial distinction, and it comes down to double entry bookkeeping. A bank cannot just create an asset for itself without a corresponding liability.
Okay.
When you sit down and sign a loan contract, your signature, your legally binding promise to pay that money back, becomes an asset on the bank's balance sheet.
Because you owe them.
Exactly. Simultaneously, the bank creates a new liability on its balance sheet, which is the deposit in your checking account. The two sides of the ledger expand at the exact same time. The bank didn't transfer existing money. It expanded its balance sheet to monetize your promise to pay.
Which brings us to the empirical proof of this. Because it's one thing to read a Bank of England paper.
And it's another to actually see it happen in real life.
Exactly. The source introduces an economist named Richard Werner. And he didn't just theorize about this balance sheet expansion. He empirically proved it.
By actually going inside the bank.
Right. He went inside the IT systems of a working commercial bank to track the exact sequence of events at the millisecond a loan is issued.
Yes, and this is where the technical details really solidify the argument. Werner looked directly at the bank's general ledger and internal accounting software during a live loan transaction.
And what did he find?
Well, if the middleman theory were true, Werner would have seen a transfer of funds from a reserve account or a depository account into the borrower's account.
A simple A to B transfer.
But that is not what the software recorded.
He found zero funds transferred from anywhere else in the bank. Zero external reserves were drawn down to cover the loan.
Nothing moved.
Nothing. The general ledger simply registered a new asset and a new liability simultaneously.
Out of thin air.
The new money was just conjured into existence, credited to the borrower, and handed over. It's a pristine example of balance sheet expansion. But, as the text points out, there is one massive catch to this.
And that catch is the engine that drives the systemic issues we're going to explore. The bank generates the principal of the loan through a ledger entry, but it doesn't do this as a public service.
No, they're not charities.
They issue that credit as debt, and that debt comes with conditions.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's pivot to the concept of interest. I want to actually think through the mechanics of this on air using a specific micro example from the text.
Okay, let's walk through it.
So imagine you sign a contract for a $1,000 loan. The bank executes the balance sheet expansion we just talked about.
Keystrokes.
Oh, right. $1,000 is credited to your account. But the fine print of the contract dictates that you owe the principal plus interest. Let's say you owe a total of $1,050.
This is the mathematical paradox that hides in plain sight.
Break it down.
If we look closely at the accounting of that transaction, the bank created the $1,000 principal.
Yeah.
But the bank never created the $50 for the interest.
Okay, let me just process the math on that. The bank only expanded the money supply by $1,000. But the contract legally demands $1,050 back.
Yes.
That extra $50 literally does not exist in the money supply from that transaction.
It does not exist. They created the exact amount of the loan, but they demand back more liquidity than they introduced into the system.
So the money required to pay the interest was never typed into existence in the first place.
Never.
Now, let's scale this up for you. From a single microloan to the macro level, to the entire global economy.
This is where it gets scary.
Every single dollar, every euro, every British pound in circulation today was created in this exact same way.
As a private bank loan.
As a private bank loan with uncreated interest attached to it. That means the entire global money supply consists of the principal of all the loans in the world.
But the total debt owed is the principal plus the interest.
Which leads us to the work of Margaret Kennedy.
Yes, she's a mathematician and monetary theorist highlighted in the text. She modeled this exact dynamic at a systems level.
And what did her models show?
Because if you look at the whole board, the total debt owed in the world always, by mathematical definition, exceeds the total money in existence.
Because of the missing interest.
Exactly. Therefore, mathematical certainty dictates that someone, somewhere, must go bankrupt. It's not a probability based on bad market conditions.
It's a structural guarantee built into the math.
It is?
The source text compares it to a high-stakes game of musical chairs. Imagine 10 people walking around 9 chairs. When the music stops, someone is going to fall on the floor.
And it's not because that person didn't walk fast enough.
Or because they didn't try hard enough. The system was rigged from the start to have a loser.
But that's not how we view it as a society.
No, when we look out at the economy and see individuals or businesses or entire nations going bankrupt, our default societal assumption is to blame them.
We assume financial irresponsibility. We say they had poor business models.
We call them lazy.
This raises an important question about how we actually analyze economic failure. While personal responsibility and business acumen obviously play a role in individual outcomes, the macro system tells a completely different story.
Mathematical story.
Right. People and businesses go bankrupt fundamentally because the system is mathematically starved of the liquidity needed to satisfy the contracts it writes.
The money to pay the interest was simply never created.
Someone is structurally designed to lose, to forfeit their collateral, to hand over real physical assets to the bank to settle a debt made of abstract ledger entries.
So we are running our entire global civilization on a mathematical paradox. And what's truly fascinating is that the source text points out that economists aren't always the ones to highlight the absurdity of this. One of the most piercing critiques came from a chemist.
Yes, Frederick Soddy. He was a Nobel laureate in chemistry from nearly a century ago.
Which seems like a strange background for an economic critique.
But when you think about it, it makes perfect sense that a physical scientist would be the one to spot the fatal flaw in this economic model.
How so?
Well, chemists study the physical world. They study mass, energy, thermodynamics. They study systems that have actual boundaries, conservation laws, and immutable limits.
Exactly. Chemistry doesn't care about your financial models or your projected quarterly earnings.
It just cares about reality.
The source text details how deeply disturbed Sadi was by our financial system because he made this profound core argument comparing numbers to nature.
Financial debt, as we've established, is just numbers typed on a screen.
Purely abstract.
Because it is abstract, it can grow exponentially forever. You can always add another zero. Compound interest can just keep compounding into infinity on a spreadsheet.
But the real world, the physical world, where we extract resources, grow food, and actually live, cannot do that.
The earth does not grow exponentially.
An acre of farmland can only yield so much wheat no matter how much you optimize it.
A mine can only produce so much copper.
The physical world has hard, uncompromising limits based on the laws of physics and biology.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Sadi's warning was a klaxon sounding for humanity. When you attach an exponentially growing financial obligation, which is what our debt-based money system fundamentally is, to a physical world that absolutely cannot keep up, you guarantee a systemic break.
It's an inevitable collision.
As the text emphasizes, it's not a system that might break under the wrong conditions. It is a system that will break by its very design.
The math demands infinite compounding growth just to pay the uncreated interest, but the planet is finite.
Numbers on a page versus actual thermodynamics.
It's a mathematical collision course with physical reality. Which really begs the question, how did we get here?
That is the million-dollar question.
How did we organize global human society around a mechanism that is mathematically doomed? Because humans traded and built societies for thousands of years without this specific architecture.
To understand that, we have to look at the historical evolution of money. The source text brings in the work of legal historians Christine Desan and Stephen Zarlenga.
Alongside the meticulous documentation of author Ellen Brown.
Yes, and together they all trace a monumental yet largely unobserved historical shift in how society creates its medium of exchange.
Let's really dig into this because this is the pivot point of the whole text.
Yeah.
What was the mechanism of this shift? Because historically, the power to create money was a public sovereign function, right?
Precisely. For centuries, the creation of money was a sovereign prerogative. A king, a state, or a local government would issue currency directly.
Like minted coins or tally sticks.
Or early paper notes. This money was spent into the economy to facilitate trade, fund public works, or, very often, to fund wars.
But the key is, it was created free of debt at the point of origin.
Exactly. It didn't have an interest rate attached the moment it was born. But over centuries, these legal historians show how this monumental power was slowly transferred out of the public sphere and delegated to private hands.
So how does a sovereign state just give up the most powerful tool it has?
It generally happened through necessity and the pressure of sovereign debt. Monarchs in early states often needed massive, immediate funding, usually for prolonged wars.
Wars are expensive.
Very expensive. And they couldn't raise that kind of capital through taxation alone without sparking a revolt. So they began chartering private institutions.
Like the early banks.
Right. In exchange for extending massive loans to the crown, these private consortiums were granted the legal franchise to issue credit and banknotes.
I see, so it was a trade-off.
Over time, the legal architecture shifted. The state delegated the sovereign power of money creation to private banks, allowing them to issue credit based on a fraction of the reserves they actually held.
And as this franchise expanded over the centuries, private bank credit slowly became the primary medium of exchange, replacing sovereign money entirely.
We essentially handed the right to create the fuel of society over to what the text calls private mechanics.
Private mechanics. And understanding the mandate of those private mechanics is vital. A public entity, at least in theory, has a constitutional or civic obligation to the public good and the stability of the society.
But private commercial banks have a very different legal and structural mandate.
They just need to make money.
Their primary obligation is to generate profit for their shareholders. They maximize the issuance of debt because that maximizes their interest returns.
Which is totally decoupled from whether the physical, real-world economy can actually sustain that debt burden.
They are operating exactly as their mandate dictates. They are private corporations maximizing revenue.
So what does this all mean?
It's a lot to take in.
It is. Let's take a breath and pull together the grand synthesis of everything we've just unpacked from this text, because it's a massive paradigm shift.
Okay, let's synthesize it.
First, the money in your bank account isn't a physical store of value that was dug out of the ground. Money is debt. It is credit expansion, created through a ledger entry when a loan is signed.
That's point one.
Second, because of the mathematical trap of uncreated interest. The total debt owed in the world is always mathematically larger than the actual money supply that exists to pay it.
Which puts all of us, on a global scale, onto what we can only describe as the treadmill of society.
The treadmill.
Think about the logical conclusion of this math. If there is never enough money in existence to pay off the compounding debt today, how does the global economy avoid total synchronized collapse right now?
By doing the only thing it can do. We have to borrow more.
We have to.
We have to take out new loans to create new money to pay the interest on the old loans.
Exactly. Society is forced into continuous credit expansion. We must borrow more new money today just to service the debt borrowed yesterday.
But to justify taking out all those new loans, society must constantly produce more goods
Extract more resources.
and consume more services. It creates this frantic, unbreakable cycle where the entire global economy has to run faster and faster, endlessly, permanently, and without limit, just to stay in the exact same place and avoid mass insolvency.
It completely reframes how you see the world when you hear politicians demanding relentless economic growth, or when you see corporations pushing hyperconsumption.
It's not just blind greed.
It is structural desperation. They have to grow, they have to expand their balance sheets, or the math collapses.
And this brings us to the most chilling quote from the entire text. It's the final verdict on the system we live in. We often look at systemic bankruptcies, at environmental degradation, at boom and bust financial crises, and we say, the system is broken, we need to fix the system.
But the text argues the exact opposite.
The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. The engine doesn't have a flaw. The engine is the flaw.
It's a deeply disturbing but mathematically sound conclusion. The engine of our economy is doing precisely what a debt-based monetary system with uncreated interest must do.
It must perpetually expand.
And in doing so, it extracts real physical wealth from the finite world to satisfy an ever-expanding abstract ledger. The crises we experience aren't glitches in the code, they are the required features of the program.
It leaves you looking at the financial headlines with entirely new eyes. The next time you see a debate about national debt or central bank interest rates or the absolute necessity of GDP growth, you'll know the underlying plumbing.
You'll know we're all navigating the mechanics of the pump.
And we want to leave you with a final, lingering, provocative thought to mull over long after this audio stops playing.
A thought experiment.
Exactly. We've spent this entire deep dive establishing that all money in circulation is created as debt. The money supply literally is the principle of all outstanding loans. So here is the question for you to explore on your own. What would actually happen if we achieved what society tells us is the ultimate financial goal? What if everyone, every person, every corporation, every government paid off all their debts tomorrow?
If the debt is extinguished.
Does the entire global money supply simply vanish to zero? Think about that. Till next time, keep diving deep.